Hey everyone, Varric here. So this video is going to be on Heroic Megaera. Uh, Now for the most part, this fight behaves pretty similar to normal, especially in regards to the Frozen Flame and Venomous heads. They still cast their same abilities, and they still behave basically in the same way, with of course the fact that they have more HP and they do more damage. However, there are some subtle differences to their abilities. I'm going to go over those real quick before I get into the one new mechanic that's added to this fight. Now with the Flame Head, he's still going to be casting Cinders on a random raid member, and this still can be dispelled and needs to be dispelled. However, the difference on Heroic is if this is on you for more than 3 seconds, it's going to apply a Cinder on the ground regardless of it's being dispelled or not. And this is a problem because you can't have these multiple patches of Cinders on the ground with everything else that's going on. Excuse me. So it becomes very important that your healers dispel this pretty much immediately. On top of the fact that the damage that you're taking while this is on you is pretty immense. You can't really keep this for very long, or you'll probably die very quickly. So normally what's going to happen is you're probably going to have this all of about a second before you become dispelled, and then that patch on the ground is going to become applied. So you don't have time to run to a really good spot to drop it and then run back. So you need to be, for us especially as hunters, we need to be at max range. That way when it's dropped, it's not going to become a problem for anybody up front. But just keep that in mind. Also, try not to be anywhere near when somebody else drops it, if you can help it. Sometimes the graphic is a little hard to tell. You might be standing away from it if somebody next to you gets it. You don't want to be standing too close to anybody regardless. You do want to stay kind of spread out. Except obviously during rampages when you want to group up. Other than that, you want to generally stay spread out. Now, as to the Frozen Head, he still does cast Torrents of Ice. It's still an 8-second cast, and it still will apply Icy Ground behind you as you run. The difference is on Heroic that after time, a certain amount of time, I believe it's up to 2 minutes, the ground that it covers will basically grow to twice the size of its original size, meaning as time goes by, the initial little patch on the ground will start to grow to a certain extent, and it'll eventually reach this limit of about twice the size of its normal part. And this really does become an issue because, again, a lot of people are going to be targeting this, and you're going to be killing, if you're following this strat, you're going to be killing the Icy Head a few times. So you're going to be dealing with Torrents of Ice quite a bit. So the real estate in the middle of your raid is going to become prime. So it's imperative that you stay at max range and try to run straight back with this. But again, it still behaves the same way, and it does a lot of damage if you should run over the icy ground or if you don't move for Torrent of Ice. If you hesitate or for whatever reason don't see the warning and get hit with it, you're going to have a bad day. It doesn't take long for it to kill you. So just try to be quick on the reflexes and make sure you start running as soon as DBM warns you that you're targeted with this. Now, the Venomous Head still does cast Acid Rain. However, the difference on Heroic is he's going to cast it at 3 random raid members instead of just 1. Now, for this particular strat, and I highly recommend that you don't kill this head, trying to deal with multiple heads in the back, casting 3 random venomous balls at people. During the, if you decide to kill this head for whatever reason, by the end of the fight, you're going to be just getting pelted with acid rain, and it's probably going to get very ugly very quickly. So I highly recommend you don't kill the Venomous Head, especially your first few times, and particularly with this strat that we're using. Now, as far as hunter specifics go, there's really nothing that you really probably should change what you ever normally do. However, I do highly recommend taking the Crouching Tiger Hidden Chimera talent for the cooldown on Deterrence. Deterrence will become your best friend in this fight, and it can save your ass on quite a few occasions. So again, I would highly recommend you use that just for the lower cooldown. But as far as everything else, just do what you normally do. Now, the one new mechanic to this fight is actually addition of a new head called the Arcane Head. Now, at the start of the fight, you're already going to be dealing with an Arcane Head in the back. And just like any time you kill a head, you'll have to start dealing with multiple heads once they die, and just keep dealing with the abilities throughout the fight. Obviously, with this particular head, you're going to be dealing with this pretty much as the start of the fight. Now, what the Arcane Head does is that it will spawn these adds called Nether Worms. Normally, there are 3 at a time. And at the start, you really only have to deal with like usually a spawn of 3, and then eventually, uh, you're gonna have to deal with 3 more, usually before each head that you're attacking dies. Um, and they don't spawn at the same exact time, meaning 3 will probably spawn, and then a few seconds later, 3 more will spawn. At least through the most of the fight. Now, once you get to the final head, and after you've killed the arcane head twice, if you follow this particular strat, um, you're easily going to be dealing with probably close to 9 of these things at the same time. Now, these things are very annoying, and this is what is probably going to complicate this fight more than anything. The head itself is really not that dangerous. It still has a breath attack called diffusion. Obviously, you don't want to be standing in this. Any of the other breaths from the heads is dangerous. Never want to be standing in that direction. But the head itself is not that dangerous when you're fighting it. It's just the stuff that you have to deal with when it's not in the front. The reason these ads are dangerous is 2 of their abilities. One being Nether Spike. It will just target a random raid member, and it does decent damage. Now, if it's just 3 of them, they're not that bad. It's when you start having to deal with like 6 or even at 9 at the later end of the fight that the damage starts getting kind of out of control. They can be stunned, they can be rooted, they can even be trapped. They can pretty much be controlled any way you need to control them. Really, the reason these guys are so dangerous is the next ability they do is called Suppression. What this does is it will stun a random raid member for up to 15 seconds. Now, this can be interrupted, and it can also be dispelled. And I should also mention that the Nether Spike that they cast can also be interrupted. However, with as far as the suppression is concerned, even should you interrupt it, they basically chain cast this, which means as soon as you dispel it from somebody, it's likely they're just going to keep reapplying it. So it becomes a lot more, I should say, it becomes a lot easier to just interrupt them before they even cast it so somebody doesn't get stunned. Now, obviously, if it's just 3 of them at a time, they can be controlled pretty easily. However, once you start dealing with a second set, things start to get a little hairy. How you handle these is probably going to depend on your raid. Again, with this particular strat, I'll tell you how we dealt with them, but you may have to deal with them differently. It did take us a few we did end up doing a few different strats, and I'll go over a couple ones that we used. Depending on your raid makeup, you may have to shift it around a little bit. Some things that was supposed to work for us with our kind of makeup that quite didn't. We had to kind of, change the strat a little bit, and that's true from any fight, really. This is just basically a guide for you to use, and you may have to adjust, as the case allows for your raid. Now, the particular strat that we use, and we didn't start with this strat, if you do happen to have, say, a paladin tank, is it entirely possible to single tank this fight. The pros of this being that your healers really only have to focus on one person to heal, which obviously makes things a little easier for them that they're not trying to keep up 2 tanks. It does make things a little easier for them. We tried this strat, and it probably could have worked for us in the long run had we kept at it a while. We just found it to be very, very dangerous. I'm not going to go into the exact mechanics of it. There's a few videos where they show a single tank strat. It just requires your tank to be really, really highly skilled. There's a certain rotation that he has to follow. He has to be very mindful of where he's standing, keeping track of stacks of especially the rotted armor from the acid head, the venomous head. It just takes a lot from your tank. He has to be really on his game. If he's not playing perfectly, things are going to get ugly real fast. But we tried this for a while, but it just didn't work. So we eventually shifted to a 2 tank strat, which is basically the same way we do it on normal, where you just have the tank switch back and forth on the heads. Obviously, with the arcane head, things get a little, not say tricky, but you do have to kind of pay attention to the stacks, and the healers are definitely going to have their work cut out for them on this fight. Now, again, with the particular strat that we use, we always start on the frozen head. And 1 tank's on the venomous head, 1 tank's on the frozen head. We kill the frozen head. Eventually, right before, usually the frozen head will die. is when you're going to start dealing with your first set of ads. Now you can, like I said, if you got a Frost Mage, they can just freeze them. They can be Death Grip, Frozen, anything that you can do to an ad can be done to these guys. Again, like I said, they can be interrupted and should be interrupted. If you get stunned, hopefully your healers can dispel you. If it's not going to happen again, you don't want to waste the dispels if it's just going to keep happening over and over again. Depending on your DPS, you may have to also back off a little bit on the first head. It really, especially if you single tank this, it's your paladin tank is going to have to make sure he keeps track of certain stacks of abilities, and you don't want to push it too fast. So if you do the single tank strat, you're just going to have to kind of adjust to what he goes off of and what he calls out to slow down or stop DPS, and then pick back off to burn the head. For 2-tank strat, we didn't really have to worry about this. We just burned the head as fast as we could. And then, of course, like I said, right towards the end of the first head dying, we deal with the first set of 3 netherworms. Ideally, you want them to be grouped up so you can just AoE them down. They don't have a ton of life, so they do die quite quickly. But again, keep in mind, every time you kill a head, a few seconds later, once the next 2 heads pop up, you're going to be dealing with the ability Rampage. And on Heroic, this ability hurts a lot. Even the first couple ones start to hurt quite a bit. So it is absolutely imperative that you stack up and make sure you get AoE heals for this, as this starts to really, really hurt. Now the problem with this is you're going to be dealing, after you kill that first Frost Head, you're going to be dealing with your Torrents of Ice and stuff. So you may end up running back at a really inopportune time, say when the next head dies, and you'll be out of range to really group up. This is where deterrence comes in handy. If for some reason you get out of range, if you're running back with Torrents of Ice, or if you have the flame buff and you manage to get away just a little bit, as you're running back in, if you're not going to make it in time, just cast Deterrence. It will completely negate any of the damage, so it buys you 5 seconds of time to run back. Hopefully that should be enough to get you in range to be getting healed so you don't end up dying on the way there, because you won't make it if you're too far away during Rampage. Now, after the first head dies and you're dealing with your first set of ads, it's really a good idea to burn those as quickly as you can. Again, you don't want them to be up too long, or they'll start casting suppression on somebody, and that stun is just really, really bad news. You want to definitely interrupt it if you can, but ideally you just want to burn them down as fast as possible. Now, once the second head pops, again, you're going to be killing the Frozen Head, the Flame Head, and then the Arcane Heads, and then kind of rinse and repeat that rotation. So once the Flame Head pops, you'll be standing usually in a predetermined spot. We have raid markers down to kind of have everybody come to a certain position depending on which head we're killing. Just like on normal, as soon as Rampage is done, you want to immediately spread back out and get back to max ranges, whichever allows. Now again, once you start dealing with Torrent of Ice, the middle of the room is going to become complete clusterfuck. There's going to be ice everywhere. Again, like I said, it's because on Heroic that original icy ground is going to expand. So after 2 or 3 of these get applied, the whole middle of the room, more than likely, if you've been trailing these straight back like you should, is going to be covered up. So it may be hard to find a good spot. Just try to get as max range, probably as close to the Venom Head breath as you can get without actually getting hit by it on the right side of the room. Excuse me. Now, once the Flame Head goes down, again, you're going to be dealing with the ads, the netherworms. There's a chance you're probably going to get 2 sets this time. So just keep in mind, you can either CC the first set and just wait for the next set to pop and then just try to blow them all up. However, this can get dangerous because now you got 6 of these ads up at the same time, and then they can just start chain stunning people, and then this becomes a real bad problem. So again, you may decide to CC the first 3 and just wait for the next 3 and then just try to burn everything at once, or you can just go ahead and start killing the first 3, and then when the next 3 pop, just go straight for them as well. Normally by the time the second set pops, the second head is getting close to dying, and then you move to your spot for the new Arcane Head. Now, again, depending on which tank strategy you decided to use, again, we use the 2 tank strat. Our tank with the Arcane Head would have it pointed off to the right. So we would basically have that whole left part of the room to deal with anything that we had to deal with as far as torrents of ice and the cinders. So just try to keep, again, you want to keep as much on that left side if you get targeted by something, and again, get the max range as fast as possible. Now this is probably the toughest part right here, is after the first arcane head, because the spot you need to get to for the next rampage from where you're standing, at least where I was standing, is a long way away. Especially towards the end of the arcane head, if you happen to get targeted by torrents of ice, which it does happen quite a few times, you may have to run quite a long distance. If you do have a druid or two in your group and you're close enough and they get the, I believe it's the Stampeding Roar speed buff, definitely take advantage of that. Again, if it doesn't look like you're going to make it and Rampage starts going off, just cast deterrence and keep running. With deterrence, again, it buys you a few seconds, so you should make it as long as you start running right before the arcane head comes down. Just keep in mind that it's possible to get targeted with this as it's going down. You definitely don't want to be trailing that ice anywhere near the front of the raid. Normally it should stop casting if it does happen right towards the end, but it's not a guarantee. We've had it continue its full cast even after the switch to Rampage when the head dies, so just keep that in mind. Now once the first arcane head is down, you'll go to your buff spot and then you'll start attacking the next frozen head. Also keep in mind that on Heroic you're still dealing with the every time a head of a particular type goes down, the next head is going to be stronger. So it's going to be doing more damage than obviously the first head, so on and so forth. Once Rampage is over, you still want to spread out, and you're still going to be dealing with all these cinders and the torrents of ice, and of course the new nether worms. Now, normally, just like on normal, the apex of this fight, or pretty much the hinge of this fight, is going to depend on around the 5th head, as this is where things just kind of can and will probably start to get out of control. By this point, Rampage is starting to do a tremendous amount of damage. Your healers are going to be struggling to keep up with the damage. If you feel like you're not going to need it, feel free to pop deterrence during this to buy some extra time for your healers. But just keep in mind that you definitely want to keep that up, deterrence available in case something else goes wrong. Also keep in mind that you can actually take the torrent of ice for the 5 seconds with deterrence, or you can also run over the icy ground with deterrence on you. And for us, it's a possibility. If there's a lot of torrent of ice and there's nowhere to go, just pop deterrence and run through the icy ground. That way you can just kind of trail it over and already another patch of icy ground to kind of help leave as much room as open as you can. It's definitely an option for us. But once you get to the 5th head, which would be a flame head at this point, this is probably where you're going to want to burn your heroism or bloodlust. This head needs to die as quickly as possible, because you're definitely going to be dealing with at least 2 sets of the arcane adds. And again, this is just, by this time the room is pretty full of icy patch on the ground. You probably got a few of these cinders as well. The rampage damage is starting to ramp up, so it's imperative that these adds die as quickly. The head, for one thing, especially dies as quickly as possible. The longer these heads are up, the more adds you're going to have to deal with. And you definitely don't have to deal with a 3rd set. So this is why you really want this head to die as quickly as possible. Now once this head dies, you're going to be dealing with the last arcane head, or the 6th head. So you definitely want to go into it with the adds as close to dead or as dead if you can get them. And then you want to spread back out on the left side again in the max range. And this is also another painful part of the fight. You're going to be dealing with arcane adds on top of this head. And you're probably going to be starting to run out of room pretty quickly. Considering all the icy patch you've already been doing for the majority of the fight is still around. And it's just not going to get any better. You're going to start running out of room regardless of how you really handle it. Now once the 6th head is down and you've got all the adds down, you need to run all the way back over to near the frost head and deal with one more rampage. Now normally if you've gotten to this point and everybody's at least alive or at least in good shape, this should be a kill. However, in this video, even on our kill, you'll see this things got ugly really quick. what happens is on this 7th head, you're going to start dealing with a lot of these nether worms. Now, of course, you do want to just CC and stun these guys as much as possible, because you're not going to want to be wasting DPS on the ads. You just want to burn the 7th head as quickly as you can before you start having to deal with, a dozen or more of these ads. As you'll see in this video, we got to the 7th head, but once these ads started spawning, I think we eventually ended up having 9 or 12 of these ads up, and then they just started chain stunning everybody. Luckily, though, we had enough up to get a kill, but it wasn't pretty. Your first kill may be about the same way. These ads just at the very end start to get very annoying. That chain stun, that suppression is just way, way annoying. So it's just something you need to be aware of. Again, the way you tackle this fight, if you decide to 1-tank it or 2-tank it. Also keep in mind there's another strat you could use is you could still single tank the heads and just have like a second tank to just be in charge of picking off the ads when they spawn. That's also a completely viable strat. For us, we just had we just had our DK. It's kind of like a pseudo tank to pick up the ads, and we just let our 2 tanks handle the heads. But it's entirely possible for your tanks to even pick up the ads themselves while they're tanking the heads. But again, that's kind of risky, as you don't want them to get stunned or maybe take the extra damage depending on how well geared they are. But again, that's also an option. There's quite a few strats on this fight that you can change. Again, for this video, we just used 2 tanks and then had our DK pick up the ads. You can also kind of decide whether or not you're going to CC the ads at the start and then kill them, or you can just kill them as they spawn. That's just going to take some experimentation on your part and how your raid's set up. But this is a real quick review. Do not kill the venomous head. Try to interrupt or stun or CC the netherworms to keep the that interruptible suppression under control as much as possible. If you get targeted with Torrent of Ice, just try to stay at max range, and then 2, just try to run straight back and keep it out of your people's hair. If you get the cinders on you, you might as well just, again, you're not going to really have time to run back to a good spot, so just be prepared to have it dispelled immediately and move out of the cinders, because you don't want to be standing in that for very long. As you're running back and forth between the heads and the rampages, if you don't look like you're going to make it to the spot to group up for rampage, pop your deterrents and it'll buy you a few extra seconds. Make sure you're not standing anywhere near the breath with the heads. Make sure you're in a good spot. Try to stay spread out and make sure you're standing at max range. I really can't stress that enough. Standing at max range makes this fight a lot easier for everybody, because you're going to start dealing with the Torrent of Ice quite a bit. So the further back you are, the longer it takes it for that ice to kind of creep up towards the front. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. If I did, just leave down the comments down below and I'll address it. But I hope this video was helpful.